For centuries, you could say that nations have been in this kind of delicate dance of trade. But sometimes that dance turns into an all-out battle. And when that happens, an ancient economic weapon gets pulled out of the sheath. Today, we're going to dig into the really high cost of these so-called tariff wars.
So how can a simple tax, that's all it is, right? How can that spark a global economic war? It sounds almost too simple, but believe me, this one little action can spiral into a massive conflict that shakes the entire global economy. So yeah, let's break down exactly how that happens.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we don't have to look very far at all. Actually, the most significant recent example is the perfect case study. I'm talking about the massive economic battle between the world's two biggest superpowers. So picture this. It's 2018. The stage is set. The U.S., citing what it called unfair trade practices, kicks things off with a whole series of tariffs against China. And look, this wasn't some minor policy tweak. No, this was the opening shot in a really high-stakes economic fight.
And from there, things just escalated. Incredibly fast. The U.S. slaps on tariffs, and boom, China immediately hits back with its own. This back and forth, this tit-for-tat cycle, it just ballooned, All of a sudden, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods being affected, and that just created this huge cloud of uncertainty over the entire global market.
But look, these aren't just abstract numbers on a chart. For real people, for specific groups like, say, American soybean farmers, the consequences were absolutely devastating. Literally overnight, their biggest export market got slammed with these crippling taxes. It's a perfect example of how these high-level political decisions have very, very real impacts on the ground. Okay, so we've seen the kind of damage these things can do, but what exactly is this economic weapon of choice? Let's dial it back and get to the basics. So at its core, a tariff is actually incredibly simple. It's just a tax. That's it. A government slaps a tax on goods coming into the country, and the whole point is to make those foreign products more expensive for people to buy at home.
Right. So why do it? What's the point?
Well, there are usually three main reasons. The first big one is to protect your own homegrown industries from cheaper foreign competition. The second, well, it's a straightforward way to raise money for the government. And third, and this is a big one we just saw, it's a powerful way to put political and economic pressure on another country. Now, this idea of using tariffs as a weapon, it's not new, not by a long shot. But history gives us this really chilling, cautionary tale about what can happen when this strategy goes completely, horribly wrong.
Look, tariffs have been part of the economic playbook for centuries, all the way back to the mercantilist empires through early America. But there's one date on this timeline that really stands out: 1930.
So the world is plunging into the Great Depression, and the U.S. passes something called the Smoot-Hawley Act. And look, on the surface, the goals seem pretty noble, right? Protect American farmers, protect factory workers from foreign competition, save American jobs. The idea was to build this big, protective wall around the U.S. economy.
But the result was a complete and utter catastrophe. Global trade didn't just slow down a bit, it collapsed. It fell by an estimated 2/3. That protective wall they wanted to build, it ended up being a prison.
See, other countries didn't just sit back and take it. They retaliated. They hit back with their own tariffs. And this kicked off a global trade war that just choked off commerce everywhere. It made the Great Depression deeper and last longer for everyone. It is like the ultimate lesson in unintended consequences.
And all of that brings us right back to the modern era. Now that we have that historical perspective, we can get a much better handle on the really complex ripple effects of the trade disputes we see today.
You see, there's this cycle of retaliation, and it's pretty predictable, and it's always damaging. It starts with one country making a move. Then another country hits back. And before you know it, you've got a chain reaction that messes up global supply chains, creates a ton of uncertainty for businesses, and you know who pays the price in the end? Consumers. All of us. We pay higher prices. And this really shows you the huge gap between what these tariff wars are supposed to do and what they actually do. Yeah, the goal might be to protect your local industry, but what happens when that same industry has to pay more for imported parts? You hope to create jobs, but the result is often just inflation for everyone. The unintended side effects can be just enormous. And the fallout goes way beyond just the economic numbers. We're talking about strained diplomatic ties. It weakens global institutions like the World Trade Organization, the very groups that were created to stop this kind of thing from happening. And it can really hurt smaller, developing nations that get caught in the crossfire between the big guys.
So, what this all comes down to, really, is this fundamental, ongoing debate that's been shaping our world for a long time. It's a battle between two totally opposing economic ideas.
Okay, so on one side, you've got protectionism. The argument there is that you have to safeguard your own nation's industries and your own security. On the other side, you've got free trade. Its champions say it promotes efficiency, it gives consumers lower prices, and it pushes the idea that countries that trade with each other are way less likely to go to war. And you know what? Both sides have valid points, which is exactly why this debate never seems to go away.
But when you look at it all, the history and the modern examples, there's one lesson that comes through loud and clear. Tariffs are a double-edged sword. For sure, they can hurt your target, but they almost always swing back and hurt you too, not to mention the wider global economy. In a real, full-blown tariff war, there are very, very rarely any true winners.
And that really just leaves us with this one big, lingering question for the future. Our world is more interconnected than it has ever been, which makes a choice even more stark. So, is the path forward going to be one of conflict, where we just keep using old weapons for new battles? Or will it be a path of cooperation, where we finally recognize that in this global economy, we pretty much all sink or swim together?